I want you to think about the one person in your life you have never once questioned. The one person whose version of events you accepted without proof, without verification, without ever once feeling like you needed either. For most of us, that person is our mother. You don't fact-check your mother. You don't audit her past. You don't sit across from her at Sunday dinner and wonder, wait, is any of this actually true? You trust her the way you trust the ground beneath your feet. Not because you consciously chose to, because it never once occurred to you that the ground could move. My name is Daniel. I'm 27 years old. And 4 months ago, my mother sat me down in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she packed my school lunches for 12 years, where she helped me with homework at the counter, where I had eaten 1,000 ordinary meals without ever suspecting a single thing, and she said 7 words that I will carry for the rest of my life. She said, "Daniel, there's something I never told you, and I want you to stay with me." Because what came after those 7 words was not simple. It was not clean. It did not resolve the way stories are supposed to resolve. But it was the most real thing that has ever happened to me. And I think if you give it the time it deserves, it might be the most real thing you've ever heard. Stay with me. This is going to go somewhere you don't expect. Let me tell you about my mother before I tell you what she did. Because that part matters. Maybe more than anything else in this story. Her name is Carol. Carol Merritt. 54 years old. 5'4". The kind of woman who remembers everyone's birthday, keeps a spare key for every neighbor on the street, and has never once, not once in my entire life, shown up to anything empty-handed. Growing up, our house was the house. The one all my friends wanted to be at after school. Not because we had the biggest TV or the best snacks, though Carol's cooking was genuinely legendary, but because of her. Because she had this quality that's hard to name exactly. A warmth that wasn't performed. A realness that didn't require effort. You walked into her orbit and you just felt safe. My father, Robert, left when I was 3. I have almost no memory of him. A shape in a doorway. The smell of a jacket. That's all I kept. And Carol never made it a wound. She never sat me down and poisoned that well the way some parents do. She just raised me. Alone. Working 2 jobs through most of my childhood, never once making me feel the weight of that. She was my whole family. Just her and me against whatever the week brought. Saturday morning cartoons on the couch. Driving lessons in an empty parking lot when I was 16, her gripping the door handle, trying not to scream. Both of us laughing too hard to be terrified. Late nights when I was in college, calling her from my dorm room not because anything was wrong, but just because hearing her voice made the distance feel smaller. She was the most consistent thing in my life. Which is exactly why, when she finally told me the truth, it felt like the floor had been pulled out from beneath the house I had been standing in for 27 years. It began 3 weeks before the kitchen conversation. A phone call I wasn't expecting on a Tuesday afternoon. Not from Carol. From a woman named Patricia Hale. I didn't recognize the name. I almost didn't pick up. Something made me. Patricia. Is this Daniel Merritt? Daniel, son of Carol Merritt, formerly Carol Dawson? Daniel. Yes. Who is this? Patricia. My name is Patricia Hale. I'm a legal assistant working on behalf of an estate matter. I'm trying to reach you regarding the estate of a Mr. Gerald Dawson. Are you familiar with that name? A beat. I searched my memory. Nothing. Daniel. No. Should I be? Patricia. Mr. Dawson passed away 6 weeks ago. He named you specifically as a beneficiary in his will. I've been trying to reach your mother to notify her as well, but she hasn't returned my calls. I thought perhaps. Daniel. I'm sorry. You said he named me specifically? Someone I've never heard of. Patricia. Yes. He listed you as Daniel Merritt, and there's a notation in the will that references a prior relationship with your mother. I think it would be best if you spoke with her directly before we go any further. But I did want you to be aware. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that call ended. Gerald Dawson. Prior relationship with your mother. Named me specifically. I called Carol immediately. She picked up on the second ring, cheerful, asking if I'd eaten dinner yet. And I opened my mouth to tell her about the call, and something stopped me. Some instinct I can't fully explain. Like a part of me already knew that this question was going to change the shape of something. And I wasn't ready yet to find out what. I told her I was just calling to say hi. She said she'd been thinking about me all day. I hung up and sat with the name Gerald Dawson for 3 more weeks. I want to be honest about this part because it doesn't make me look entirely good. I Googled him. Gerald Dawson. The search wasn't hard. He'd been a businessman. Modest profile, owned a regional supply company for decades, semi-retired. Died at 71 in a town about 4 hours from where I grew up. Survived by a daughter from his first marriage. Wife predeceased him. He had a LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in years. A photo, a heavy-set man with gray hair and kind eyes, smiling in front of what looked like a company picnic. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to find myself in a stranger's face. Not finding anything clear, but not finding nothing either. I looked up Carol's maiden name, Dawson. Same last name. The same. I'd always known her maiden name. I'd seen it on documents 100 times. I had never once thought to wonder whether it was also someone else's name. 3 weeks I sat with this. 3 weeks of Sunday calls with Carol where I laughed at her stories and asked about her garden and said nothing about any of it. And then I couldn't hold it anymore. I drove to her house on a Saturday morning. I didn't call ahead. The drive was 4 hours. I had a whole speech prepared. Calm. Measured. Adult. Something that opened space for her to explain without making her feel cornered. I walked into her kitchen. She was at the stove. She turned around when she heard the door, and her whole face lit up that specific Carol Merritt brightness, the one that's been aimed at me my whole life. Carol. Daniel. You didn't tell me you were coming. I would have made something. Daniel. Who is Gerald Dawson? The brightness didn't fall all at once. It dimmed. Slowly. Like a light being turned down by a dial rather than a switch. She turned back to the stove. Turned the burner off. Set down the spatula with the careful precision of someone buying themselves seconds. Carol. Where did you hear that name? Daniel. A woman named Patricia Hale called me. Legal assistant. Said he left me something in his will. Said there was a prior relationship between you two. Silence. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower hummed. Carol, sit down. Daniel. Mom. Carol. Please. Sit down. I sat. She stayed standing for a moment, her back to me, hands flat on the counter. I watched her shoulders rise with a breath. Then she turned around and sat across from me. And the expression on her face was something I had never once seen there in 27 years. It looked like someone finally putting down something extremely heavy. Carol, I have been trying to figure out how to tell you this for a very long time. And I think the fact that you're here, asking me directly, means the time is now whether I'm ready or not. Daniel, tell me what, Mom? She looked at me across the table. And she said it. Carol, Gerald Dawson was your biological father. I want to describe what happened in my body in the 5 seconds after she said that. Nothing dramatic. No table flipping. No shouting. Just a kind of stillness. Like every system in me hit pause simultaneously. Because here's the thing about a revelation like that. Your brain doesn't immediately go to the big questions: who am I? What is real? It goes to the small, specific, concrete things first. It went to, but she told me my father's name was Robert. It went to, I have a birth certificate. I have seen my birth certificate. It went to, she packed my lunches every morning for 12 years and she knew this, and she packed my lunches anyway. Daniel. Robert Merritt. Carol. Robert was my husband. We were married when you were born. He is legally your father. He left when you were 3, you know that part. But biologically. Daniel. Gerald Dawson. Carol. Yes. Daniel. How long have you known? Carol. Since before you were born. 3 words. Since before you were born. I sat with those 3 words for a very long time. Daniel. So my entire life. You've known my entire life. Carol. Yes. Daniel. And you never told me. Carol. No. Daniel. Why? She looked down at her hands on the table. And for the first time in my 27 years of knowing Carol Merritt, I watched my mother not have an easy answer. Before we go further, have you ever found out that someone you trusted completely had been keeping something from you for years? Not a small thing. A foundational thing. What did that feel like in the first moment? Drop it in the comments. She talked for a long time. And I want to give it to you the way she gave it to me, not cleaned up, not summarized into a tidy paragraph, but the actual shape of it. Because the shape matters. Carol. I was 24. I was working at a regional accounting firm. Gerald was a client. He was 38, already established, already successful. And I was young, and honestly a little dazzled by him. We were involved for about 8 months. Daniel, involved. Carol, yes. And I want to be clear, it was never a love story. It was complicated. He was not a bad man. But he was not available to me in the ways that mattered. He had obligations, his first marriage had ended, but there was his daughter, his business, and he was honest with me about the fact that what we had wasn't going to become something permanent. I accepted that. I told myself I was fine with it. Daniel. And then you got pregnant. Carol. And then I got pregnant. I told him. And Daniel, he wasn't cruel about it. He wasn't dismissive. He offered to be financially responsible. He said he would be there in whatever capacity I needed. But I could see that the news had frightened him. That he was looking at a situation he didn't know how to absorb. And I was 24 and proud and honestly terrified myself. And I made a decision. Daniel, you made a decision. Carol, I told him I didn't need anything from him. That I was going to handle it. That I had met someone, Robert, and that we were getting serious, and that I was going to build a life that was stable. And I asked Gerald to step back. Daniel. And he just did. Carol. He wasn't a man who pushed where he wasn't wanted. He respected the line I drew. He sent a letter once when you were about 2 asking how you were. I wrote back. Told him you were healthy and happy and loved. And that was the last contact we had for almost 25 years. Daniel. Until. Carol. Until about 8 months ago. I got a letter from him. He had been diagnosed with something serious. He wrote to tell me he was thinking about putting together his affairs. And that he had thought about you for years, apparently, and that he wanted to make sure you were taken care of in whatever way he still could be. He asked if I would tell you. I told him I would. And then She stopped. Daniel. And then you didn't. Carol. I was scared. Daniel. Of what? And here is where she looked at me with the most undefended expression I have ever seen on another human face. Carol. Of losing you. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like I was protecting myself. And I was. I won't pretend otherwise. But it was also real, this fear that if I told you, you would look at me differently. That you would look at everything we had built and wonder how much of it was true. And Daniel, all of it was true. Every single piece of it. I need to be honest with you about where I went in the hours after that conversation. I drove to a gas station 3 blocks from her house, sat in the parking lot, and just didn't move for a while. Not crying. Not on the phone. Just sitting there with the engine running, watching people go in and out of the glass doors. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about a revelation like this. The anger doesn't come first. The grief comes first. Not grief for a father I never knew. Grief for the version of my life that turned out to be different from the one I'd been living in my head. Every memory reshuffled. Every conversation with Carol suddenly had a second layer underneath it, a layer where she was holding this while we talked, while we laughed, while she watched me grow up and helped me and loved me. She was holding this the whole time. And the question that kept surfacing, the one I couldn't shake, wasn't, how could you lie to me? It was, who else in this story didn't get to make a choice? Because Gerald Dawson had written her a letter asking her to tell me. And she had said she would. And she hadn't. And then he had died. And now he was gone. And I would never get to stand in a room with my biological father and ask him a single question. That's not Carol's fault. Not entirely. But it was a door that had closed. And that specific grief, the grief of the closed door, was something I needed to sit with alone for a while. I drove home that evening. Carol called 3 times. I let it go to voicemail each time. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. I needed space that wasn't filled with her voice before I could figure out what to do with all of this. My best friend Jamie, I've known him since we were 12. He was the first person I told. Not because I needed advice. Because I needed someone to just hear it. Scene 2, at Jamie's apartment that evening. Jamie, wait. Back up. She knew your whole life and never. Daniel, my whole life. Jamie, and this guy Gerald, he left you something in his will. Daniel, apparently. Jamie, have you found out what? Daniel, I haven't called the legal assistant back yet. I don't know how to do that without feeling like I'm making it real. Jamie, it's already real, man. Daniel, I know that. I know that intellectually. But there's a difference between something being real and you being ready to live in the reality of it. I'm not there yet. Jamie, how are you feeling about Carol? Long pause. I stared at the ceiling. Daniel, I don't know. And that's the honest answer. I know she loves me. I have never doubted that for a single day of my life. What I don't know is what to do with the fact that the person who loves me most also made a decision repeatedly, for 27 years that was mine to make. She decided what I got to know about my own life. And I don't have a clean feeling about that yet. Jamie, you don't have to have a clean feeling. It's been 6 hours. Daniel, yeah. Jamie, what do you need right now? Daniel, I need to sit with it. I need to not be told how to feel about it. And eventually I need to go back and ask her the questions I couldn't ask today. Jamie, what stopped you today? Daniel, I think I was afraid of the answers. And I think I was more afraid that if she explained it well enough, if she made it make enough sense, I'd have to forgive her before I was ready to. And I didn't want to do that yet. 4 days after the kitchen conversation, something arrived in the mail. Carol had forwarded it. No note attached. Just an envelope addressed to me in handwriting I had never seen before. Inside, a single folded page. It was dated 8 months ago, before he died. I want to read you what it said. Not word for word, those words are mine, and I'm not ready to share all of them. But the shape of it. He wrote that he had thought about me for every year of my life. That there wasn't a birthday that passed without him wondering. That he had respected Carol's decision because he believed at the time that it was what was best for me. That he had never stopped wondering if he'd made the right choice by stepping back. He wrote that he was not looking for absolution. That he understood he had been a stranger to me, and that was in part a consequence of choices he had made or hadn't made when it mattered. He wrote that whatever I did with this information was entirely my decision. That I owed him nothing. That the only thing he wanted, if he could want anything at this point, was for me to know that I had been thought of. That I had been carried in someone's awareness, quietly, from a distance, for 27 years. He wrote, "You deserve to know you are wanted. I'm sorry it took this long for anyone to tell you." I read that letter 4 times. And then I sat on my kitchen floor and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was a kid. Not just for him. Not just for myself. For Carol too, for the version of her that was 24 years old and terrified and making a decision she thought was protecting everyone, not knowing she was also taking something away. I want to ask you something directly. When you find out someone kept a secret to protect you, does the intention matter? Does it change how the betrayal feels? Think about that and tell me in the comments. 2 weeks after the kitchen conversation, I drove back to Carol's house. This time I called ahead. She picked up on the first ring. I said, "I'm coming Saturday. I have more questions. I need you to be honest with me, not the edited version, not the version that makes it easier. The whole truth, whatever it costs." She said, "I'll be here." The drive felt different this time. Not the numb shock of that first Saturday. Something sharper, more specific. I had spent 2 weeks sitting with my grief, and now I needed answers. I had written questions in my phone. Not because I needed notes, because I knew that if I was in the room with her, if she was looking at me with those eyes, I might go soft. I didn't want to go soft yet. I needed her to answer for it first. She had made food. Of course she had. A full spread on the kitchen table, everything I loved growing up. All of it. And for a moment I stood in the doorway and felt the old pull of it. The way this house, this kitchen, this woman had always meant safety. I sat down. I didn't eat. Daniel, I need to ask you some things and I need you to not protect me while you answer them. Carol. Okay. Daniel. Did you ever plan to tell me? Not because Gerald wrote to you. On your own, did you ever actually plan to sit me down and say this? She held my gaze. And I give her credit, she didn't look away. Carol, I planned to more times than I can count. When you turned 18. When you graduated college. When you got your first real job and came home for the weekend and you looked so much like yourself, so settled, and I thought now is the time. And I didn't. Daniel. Why not? Carol, because every time I got close to it, I told myself you were happy. That what you didn't know wasn't hurting you. That the risk of changing everything was bigger than the benefit of telling the truth. I know how that sounds. Daniel, it sounds like you were protecting yourself. Carol, yes. It was that too. I won't pretend otherwise. Daniel, when Gerald wrote to you 8 months ago, and you told him you would tell me. Carol, yes. Daniel, and then he died before you did. Carol, yes. Daniel, Mom, he died thinking you had told me. He died thinking I knew. The room went very quiet. Carol, I don't know what he thought. Daniel, you told him you would tell me. He was a dying man who wanted to know his son knew he existed. And you let him believe. Carol, I know. Her voice cracked. I know. And there is not a version of that I can explain that makes it okay. There is not a sentence I can say to you that makes that okay. I failed him. I know I failed him. Daniel, you failed me too. Carol, I know that too. The silence after that was long. Not comfortable. Not resolved. The silence of something real being named out loud for the first time. Daniel, the estate. What he left me. Carol, I don't know the details. Patricia Hale would know. Daniel, did you know he was going to include me? Carol, he mentioned it in his letter. He said he wanted to, in whatever small way he still could, make sure you knew you mattered to him. Daniel, a man I never met, who I never got the chance to meet, because you made a choice for me. Carol, yes. Daniel, I want you to hear that. I'm not saying it to punish you. I'm saying it because I need it acknowledged. Clearly. Without qualification. She looked at me across the living room, and for the first time in my life, my mother looked small. Not diminished, she was still Carol Merritt, still the most real person I'd ever known. But human in a way that was entirely new. Fallible in a way I had never once allowed myself to see. Carol, I hear it. I made a choice that wasn't mine to make. I kept a truth that was yours to have. And I am so sorry, Daniel. Not the kind of sorry that asks you to move on quickly. The kind that knows it needs to sit and be earned back over time. I called Patricia Hale the following Monday. The estate wasn't vast. Gerald Dawson had been comfortable, not wealthy. What he had left me was specific and deliberate, and it told me more about who he was than any photograph ever could. A savings account. Modest. With a note attached that said, for whatever you're working toward. A box of photographs which Patricia mailed to me of him at various stages of his life. With dates written on the back in neat handwriting. And a letter addressed to me personally, separate from the legal documentation. Longer than the one Carol had forwarded. More specific. More searching. He wrote about his own father, a distant, emotionally unavailable man who had made him feel like an inconvenience. He wrote about how he had told himself he was giving me a better start by stepping back, that a clean story with Carol was better than a complicated one with him in it. He wrote about how he had started questioning that logic in his 50s and had never fully made peace with it. He wrote, I don't know you. That is my loss more than yours. I hope the life Carol gave you was extraordinary. From what little I could tell from a distance, she is a remarkable woman. I hope you can see that, even knowing what you now know. I read that line 3 times. Even knowing what you now know. He had anticipated the complexity. He had sat with the fact that his acknowledgement would also be an exposure of Carol's secret. And his last request in the letter, in the explicit statement of it, was that I find a way to see her clearly rather than only as the person who had failed me. A man I had never met, asking me, from beyond his death, to extend grace to my mother. I put the letter down, went for a walk, came back an hour later, picked it up and read it again from the beginning. I want to tell you about the two voices that lived in me for the weeks following all of this, because I think most of you will recognize them. The first voice was the one that said, "She lied to you." For 27 years. Every single day was a day she could have told you and chose not to. Every birthday, every graduation, every late-night phone call she knew, and she chose silence. That is not a small thing. That is the architecture of your entire life being built on a foundation she knew was incomplete. You have the right to be angry. You have the right to take your time. You have the right to decide whether the relationship can survive this at all. The second voice was quieter. It said, "You know her. You have known her for 27 years. Not the secret, but her. The woman who worked double shifts so you could go on the school trip. The woman who drove 4 hours to surprise you on your birthday your freshman year of college. The woman who has never not once made you feel like a burden or a mistake or anything less than the center of her world." Does one decision, even a 27-year decision, erase that woman? Or does it make her human? And is there a version of love that includes acknowledging someone's humanity, their fear, their failure without requiring you to pretend it didn't happen? I lived in the space between those two voices for about 6 weeks. And slowly, not all at once, not cleanly, not permanently, the second one got a little louder. 2 questions, and I want your honest answer to both. First, is there a difference between a lie told to protect someone and a lie told to protect yourself? Second, can both be true at the same time? Drop your thoughts below. I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened next. Healing is not a moment. It is not a conversation that resolves everything and returns the world to its previous shape. There is no previous shape to return to. Once you know something, you live in the world where you know it. The question is not how to go back. The question is what you build in the world where you now live. What I built, what Carol and I built, carefully, imperfectly, over the following months started with one decision I made about 3 weeks after my second visit. I called her. Not to forgive. Not to fight. Just to talk. "Carol. Daniel. Daniel. Hey. I'm not calling to resolve anything. I'm not ready for that yet. I'm calling because I've been doing a lot of thinking and there are some things I want to say, and I want you to just listen." Carol. Okay. Daniel. I've been angry. I still am, parts of me. And I need you to know that's real, and I'm not going to perform my way past it to make it easier for both of us. I'm not doing that. Carol. I don't want you to. Daniel. Good. Because here's what else is also true at the same time. I read Gerald's letter. The long one. And he said something that I've been sitting with. He said he hoped I could see you clearly, even knowing what I know. And I've been trying to figure out what that means. What it means to see you clearly rather than only seeing the failure. Carol. What have you come up with? Daniel. That clearly means both things. It means I see the woman who raised me and I see her fully. I see what that cost her. I see what she built for me. And it also means I see the woman who was afraid and made a choice she had no right to make because the fear was louder than the honesty. And I can hold both of those things. I'm learning how to hold both of them. A long pause. Carol. That's more than I deserve right now. Daniel. Maybe. But it's where I actually am. And I'd rather tell you where I am than pretend to be somewhere more convenient. Carol. Can I say something? Daniel. Yeah. Carol. I have been thinking about Gerald too. About the letter he wrote me. About the fact that he died believing I had followed through. And I want you to know I don't know how to make peace with that. I might not ever fully make peace with that. But what I can do is make sure that going forward, nothing between you and me is withheld. Whatever you want to ask, whatever you want to know. I'm done protecting myself at your expense. Daniel. I'm going to hold you to that. Carol. Please do. Patricia Hale mailed me the box of photographs Gerald had left about 2 weeks after our call. I opened it on a Sunday afternoon with coffee and no particular agenda. He was a young man, in the early 20s, early 30s, lean, dark-haired. A smile that I recognized with a physical jolt somewhere in my chest because it was the same slightly crooked pull at the left corner that I saw in my own mirror every morning. There was a photo of him at what looked like a company picnic, the same expression as the LinkedIn photo, but younger, easier. There was one of him with a small girl I assumed was his daughter from his first marriage, both of them laughing at something out of frame. There was one photograph, tucked near the bottom of the box that I had to sit with for a long time. It was recent enough that his hair was fully gray. He was standing at what looked like the edge of a park somewhere looking at the camera, and he wasn't smiling exactly. He just looked present. Direct. Like someone who had decided to stop looking away from things. On the back, in his handwriting, Daniel. In case you ever wondered. That's all. No date. No explanation. Just, in case you ever wondered. I put the photo on my bookshelf. Not because everything was resolved. Not because the grief was over. But because he had existed and he had thought of me, and that was real, and real things deserve a place in the room where you live. I hadn't thought much about Gerald's daughter, my half-sister, technically until Patricia mentioned her in a follow-up call. Her name was Sandra. She was 36. She had been notified about me as a beneficiary in the will, which meant she knew I existed. I sat with that for a while. Then I sent her a message through the estate attorney. Short. No expectation attached. Just, my name is Daniel. I understand this is strange. I have no agenda here. If you ever wanted to talk, I'm open to it. And if you'd rather not, I completely understand that too. She replied 4 days later. Also short. She wrote that she had suspected for years that their father had a complicated history he wasn't fully sharing. That his final years had been marked by a specific kind of reflection that she now understood better. That she wasn't sure what she wanted yet. But that she appreciated that I'd reached out without pressure. We have exchanged maybe a dozen messages since then. It is slow and careful and real. I don't know what it becomes. But I'm not in a hurry for it to become anything other than what it is right now, two people who share something neither of them asked for, figuring out carefully how much room to make. I want to tell you where things stand with my mother, because it's not a clean story, and I'm not going to give you a clean version of it. We talk every week. We have dinner once a month. I have driven back to her house 3 more times since the kitchen conversation, not dramatically, just ordinarily. Because she is still my mother. Because the foundation of what we have was not a lie. It was built on real things. Love that was real. Sacrifice that was real. The kind of presence that doesn't get manufactured. But things are different. Not worse. Different. Like we are in a relationship that has been taken apart and put back together, and the rebuilt version is sturdier in some ways and has visible seams in others, and both of those things are simply true at the same time. I ask her things now I wouldn't have asked before. Not about the secret specifically, but about herself. Her fears. The version of her that was 24 and alone, and making decisions she wasn't equipped for. I ask about that woman with genuine curiosity, rather than judgment. And she answers. Fully. Without the edited version. We are more honest than we have ever been. That is something I did not expect to find on the other side of betrayal. More honesty. More real. As if the thing that was hidden was taking up space that can now be filled with something better. Here is what I have come to understand about secrets, specifically the kind that are kept out of love, or out of fear dressed up as love. They don't protect the person they're supposedly protecting. They protect the person keeping them. Carol told herself for 27 years that she was shielding me from a complicated truth. But I was never in danger from the truth. I was in danger from not having it, from building an understanding of myself on incomplete information, from growing up in a house where love was real, but the story was not entirely true. The secret didn't protect me. It protected Carol from having to watch me process something difficult. From having to hold my questions. From having to see in my face what this information might do to her image in my eyes. I don't say that to condemn her. Humans are built to protect themselves. Fear is not a character flaw, it's a survival mechanism. But it can make us do things that cost other people dearly. What I ask myself now and what I ask you watching this is, what are you protecting someone from that they actually have the right to know? What truth are you carrying that belongs to someone else? Not because the disclosure will be easy, but because they deserve to have it and you don't have the right to decide otherwise. About a month ago, Carol and I were sitting in her kitchen again. Late afternoon. Tea this time. Neither of us had an agenda. Just being in the room together, which is something we had not done easily for a while, and are slowly learning to do again. And she said something I want to give you because I've been thinking about it ever since. Carol, I want to ask you something and you don't have to answer it. Daniel. Okay. Carol, do you think you can get there? To something like not forgetting. I'm not asking for forgetting, but something like choosing to stay. A long pause. I looked at the table, then at her. Daniel, I think I'm already choosing to stay. Every time I drive up here. Every time I pick up the phone. The choice isn't at the end of the road, it's the road itself. And I'm walking it. Carol, even angry. Daniel, even angry. Some days more than others. But yeah, even angry. She reached across the table. Didn't grab my hand, just placed hers near it. Not asking for anything. Just present. Carol, I spent so many years afraid of losing you by telling the truth. And what I actually risked losing you over was the hiding of it. I want you to know that I understand that now. Not just intellectually. In my bones. Daniel, I know. Carol, and I know that's not enough on its own. I know it has to be shown. Daniel, yeah, it does. She nodded. We sat there in the kitchen for a while longer. The lawnmower outside. The clock. The tea going warm and then cool. The same kitchen. Different house than the one I grew up thinking I lived in. But still in the ways that mattered most home. I want to leave you with something that is not a lesson. I'm not in a position to give lessons. I'm still in the middle of this. But I want to leave you with something real. Gerald Dawson existed. He thought about me for 27 years from a distance. He made his own mistakes stepping back when he might have pushed for more, accepting a boundary that wasn't his to simply accept. He was a complicated man who did what he thought was right and spent the rest of his life wondering if he'd been right about it. Carol Merritt raised me. She gave me everything. She had her time, her energy, her Saturday mornings, her midnight worries. She made a decision out of fear that wasn't hers to make, and she carried it alone for 27 years in ways I'm still learning to understand. And me, I'm somewhere in the middle of all of it, figuring out what it means to be a person whose story has more chapters than he knew about. Figuring out what it means to love someone who failed you and choose to keep loving them while not pretending the failure didn't happen. Here is what I know. Truth is not the enemy of love. It is what love requires to survive. Not just honesty in the easy moments, but honesty in the expensive ones. The ones where being truthful costs you something. Where you have to look at a person you love and say something that might change how they see you. That is the real test. Not whether you love someone. Whether you trust them enough and respect them enough to tell them the truth when it matters most. Carol and I are rebuilding. It is slow. It is imperfect. Some weeks are easier than others. But we are in it together. Honestly, this time. Both of us. And I genuinely think that what we're building now is something stronger than what we had before. Not because the secret made us stronger, but because choosing honesty, choosing to stay, choosing to work through something hard rather than around it that builds something that didn't exist before. Something real. Something that can hold. Question 1. What is the hardest truth you have ever told someone you loved? Was it worth it? Question 2. If you found out today that someone in your life had kept a major secret from you for years out of love, out of fear, what would you need from them in order to begin to trust them again? Question 3. Is forgiveness something that happens in a moment, or is it a direction you keep choosing every day? Tell me what you think. If this story found something real in you, if you saw yourself somewhere in Daniel, or in Carol, or even in Gerald writing letters that arrived too late, then I hope you carry one thing from it. It is never too late to tell the truth. And it is never too simple to forgive. Both of those things can be hard. Both of them can cost you something. but the life you get to live when you choose honesty, when the people around you know your actual story, not the edited version. That life is bigger. It is heavier sometimes, but it is real. And real is worth more than comfortable. Every single time. If this story meant something like it, share it with someone who might need to hear it today, and subscribe because there are more stories coming. Stories about the people who shaped us, the truths that changed us, and the extraordinary difficult work of choosing to stay. I'll see you in the next one.